Good evening, beautiful people, or good morning, depending on when you're listening into the Mose Knows podcast. Thank you for being here. It's your boy, Cory Mose. Joining me today is 24/7 Sports Eric Henry. Thank you for hopping on for the second straight week, bro. Appreciate you.
Listen, man, anytime I get that Mose Knows invite, I got to make it happen. I'm going to clear whatever's going on in the schedule. As long as it's not CBS Sports / 24/7 Sports related. If it's not that, I'm here for Mose Knows, baby. And I appreciate the invite to go watch football this past Sunday, too, as well. I appreciate that as well.
Hey, good little Sunday slate. Houston Texans. Hey, we're going to win the division. I've been trying to tell people that. Colts, they're going to choke it away. Jags going to jag off. We already know. And so
we discussed that on Sunday.
Texans coming, baby. Texans coming. Bucks, big time win for the Bucks.
Much needed win. Hanging on. We're hanging on to the NFC South by a thread, but we're hanging on. That's all that matters.
And now some people are hanging on to their college football playoff hopes. That's what we're joining here today, talking about instant reaction of the college football playoff rankings that just came out. If you're listening to this, we are 20 minutes after 6:30, and so we are doing a really instant reaction for what we just saw go down with the new rankings. Of course, everything kind of goes the way some people planned it to be, when it comes to the top 15 to 14 teams. But I know some Texas fans may be kind of mad at Texas not being in that top 10 or top 12 conversation, but they are number 13, which, first off, let's just start there, Eric. I think that's where they needed to be. That's where they should be. You jump Utah. I think you have to jump Vanderbilt because the head-to-head. We'll get that later on another topic. But what do you think, or what was your opinions about Texas being number 13?
Number 13 is where I expected them to be. Number 13 is where I thought they should be. I know there's some Texas fans would have wanted them higher at 12 or even in the field at 11. I mean, that's probably just fans being fans in my mind. But when you take a look at the field right now, it's currently constituted, I think number 13 is the appropriate spot for Texas. I'm sure we can get into it, a little bit later as far as Texas's, playoff resume. Steve Sarkisian making the rounds. I mean, Cory, I know you've been on the beat a little longer than I have, but I have not seen Steve Sarkisian do this much media in this short of a time.
Never, bro. Never. Felt like he was on a campaign trail. Like, what do we do? Are you running for president?
Every hour I looked up, it's like Steve Sarkisian somewhere, and I got to listen to all of it, right? So that, and we'll hear from Steve Sarkisian tomorrow for signing day, but nevertheless, which I'm sure he'll have more to say. But no, it's where I thought Texas should be. Really, if you're a Longhorn fan, I guess you're kind of looking at, hey, the only pathway that I can see, unless, you see something where I'm mistaken, the only pathway I can see is Georgia beating Alabama in a fashion that is so, quote unquote, decisive that Alabama is now a three-loss team that, let's say they lose by 21 points, right? Then you probably pair that loss in a similar vein to the way Texas lost to Georgia. And then, of course, Alabama has the now horrendous loss to Florida State, right?
Yeah.
In the same way Texas lost to Florida. So that's just kind of my thoughts on the Longhorns as we sit at 6:53 Eastern time or Central time. I'm a Florida guy, my bad. 6:53 Central time here on Tuesday.
But you're totally right, though. I think if you compare at that point, if Georgia does, let's say, blow out or just beat Bama by 20 plus, that's the exact same record or schedule, I should say, that Texas has right now. You have that bad loss, which Texas has Florida, then Bama will have Florida State. Then you have two semi-losses that aren't really bad because they're also against playoff teams in Georgia and Oklahoma, while Texas would, of course, have Georgia and then Ohio State. But because you have Georgia and Ohio State, I would say Texas would have the edge because those losses aren't as bad compared to Georgia and Oklahoma. And you have that common opponent in Oklahoma where Texas won and you lost to. So I would have Bama under Texas if they were to get beaten by more than 20 points to Georgia in the SEC championship game, which would totally be against what the whole committee was talking about, right? About how you don't get penalized for championship games. But they could drop, arguably, and I was looking at this, to be honest, I think they're trying to make a loophole to get Notre Dame and Miami in.
Right.
I think that's basically what they're doing. They're saying if Alabama loses by 14, 15, or 20 plus points, then we'll just bump up Notre Dame to 9, and we will just delete all the conversation about who should be in Notre Dame or Miami and put them both in. Because then you have the argument that, well, Bama's a 3-loss team, Miami's a 2-loss team. Bama has that bad loss to Florida State, which is nowhere near that loss to Louisville or nowhere near that loss to SMU. And Miami has a win over Notre Dame, which is a legit win compared to Notre Dame, who's I just think is ranked too high anyways. And so I think they're trying to set themselves up to save themselves from that conversation? What say you?
It's interesting you view it that way. So let's start, right? So for listeners, viewers who may not realize this, Cory made a point in talking about the conference championship games and how that could play a factor in the final rankings. Now, let's go back to last year. Ward Manuel, the former head of the CFP, selection committee, basically said that, hey, we're not gonna make huge, sweeping movements based off the final week of the season being conference championship week, right? They basically said, hey, what you've done, your resume through the regular season, more or less is going to be where you are. That's part of the reason, Cory, why you've seen throughout the history, right, multiple SEC teams make the college football playoff. Because just because you lose the SEC title game and you went in with a certain record doesn't mean you're going to fall out. Or even if you're the second place team, does not mean that you're going to fall out, right? Now, as you noted, what we heard from Hunter Yurachek, Arkansas AD, was different. He said, yeah, we're basically evaluating all our options, right? And I believe it was Reese Davis who was hosting the show who said, hey, I'm going to read that as, there's still room for Miami to possibly rise. I don't know if, Cory, you still were watching the show at that time.
No, I was. Yeah, I peeped it.
Yeah. And Hunter Yurachek looked like he wanted no part of that conversation.
Answering that question at all, bro.
At all. But that is the only way you can view it, right? I think if you're Texas, you have to hope that applies to you as well. But no, in specificity, what you talk about, the Notre Dame Miami kind of dichotomy, and I guess we'll get into that in a second. I still don't necessarily understand how Notre Dame is over Miami when you have a head-to-head win, a head-to-head matchup. But yeah, it does seem as if that's kind of where they're setting themselves up.
And we can go there right now because you're totally right. I don't understand that either because if you look, 2 spots down, Texas versus Vanderbilt, Texas won that head-to-head, and so they jumped Texas over Vanderbilt. So to me, they thought in the committee room, okay, Texas has 3 losses, Vanderbilt has 2, but they went head-to-head, so we can't rank Texas 1 spot lower than Vanderbilt. Which to me, why aren't you having that same thought process with Notre Dame and Miami? That's where I'm just confused about. I don't know if you maybe have something that you can say to that, because to me, that is the prime example of you're contradicting yourself. You can't put Texas above Vanderbilt and not put Miami above Notre Dame. It just doesn't make sense to me.
Cory, I guess it all depends if you believe losses to Louisville and SMU are worse than losses to Miami and Texas A&M, right? Because so just for those who don't know, Miami lost to Louisville and SMU. Those are their 2 losses. And Notre Dame lost to, of course, Miami and Texas A&M, right? Back-to-back weeks. Even if you want to say, right, that Notre Dame's losses were to, I believe, a 10th ranked Miami team, I believe 16th ranked A&M at the time. And we obviously have seen what Texas A&M had become, right? So they lost to Texas, but you saw what their season ended up being. Even if you want to say, okay, those 2 losses are quote unquote better losses, right? That opens the door for Steve Sarkisian to say, well, okay, look who we lost to, right?
Yeah.
But I'll put that aside. B, one of those losses is to the 2 teams that are in contention. I don't know how you get around that fact. That's the only thing that I cannot make sense of, Cory. If we get to, 6, I guess it's Tuesday, right? So 5 days from now, and Notre Dame ends up in the playoff field, and Miami does not. If you're a Hurricane player, fan, otherwise, you have to be thinking, we beat that team. Yes. What more? We have the same record. We're not going to the conference title game. They don't have a conference title, and we beat that team. What more do you want? Cory, I heard you kind of, I don't want to derail the show, but I heard you kind of play around with this when we were out Sunday. Is there a need for a play-in?
No, there's definitely a need for a play-in.
Because we have the first 4 in men's basketball, right?
I totally think there's a need for a play-in. I think the whole thing should be no committee, just play the field. I think this week, and I'm not going to take credit for this at all. This is all Joe Klatt. Joe Klatt kind of pitched this out there, and I agree with him. I think this is exactly what it should be. This week particularly, we have championship week. First off, that's already a disadvantage to a team like Ohio State or Indiana, who now had to play each other. Who knows what happens in that game? Julian Sand could get hurt. Jeremiah Smith could have a setback. And so now you're going into the playoff with a team like Oregon, who doesn't have to play in the Big Ten championship. And now they are just chilling for a bye week, scouting, watching the game for those 2 opponents, compared to those 2 who had done a better job in the regular season to get to that point, and now they have to play an extra game. Let's level the playing field and have everybody play this week. So to do that, you have 4 SEC automatic qualifiers. You have 4 Big Ten automatic qualifiers. You have 2 Big 12 and 2 ACC, one group of 5 and one at large, which because Notre Dame's too scared to get into a conference, it'll probably be Notre Dame every year. And so the way it goes is 1 versus 2 in the SEC. And we'll just do SEC, for example. 1 versus 2 in the SEC, they both get in. Then you have the number 3 seed versus number 6 seed. In this year's, I guess, end of the season seeding, it will be Oklahoma is going to Ole Miss, 3 versus 6. Whoever wins that gets in. Then you would have Texas going to A&M for a play-in. That sounds amazing. I mean, after you just went to DKR, lost to the Longhorns, you get a chance to get your revenge the next week for a play-in spot, and whoever wins that gets into the playoff. I think that's awesome. And so the same thing will happen with the Big Ten. When it comes to the Big 12 and ACC, 1 versus 4, 2 versus 3. Winners of that gets in. I think that's exactly what it should be. Everything should be handled on the field, because this is what happens when you allow a committee. The answer isn't, let's expand the field. That's definitely not the answer, because now you're going to have teams like USC saying they should get in. You have teams like Michigan saying they should get in. Let's forget about that. I just say you handle everything on the field on championship week. Everyone has that extra game now instead of just the 2 teams that had a great season, and it's level. And I think that's the way it should be. And I respect Joe Clapp for putting it out there, and I agree with him. And so that's why, we talked about that on Sunday, and that's what we kind of dabbled with. But I think that's the right way to go about it. Forget this whole committee thing, because clearly I think we're humans. There's faults all the time. We're not perfect. And I think the more we put human nature into this decision, there's always going to be people complaining.
I just want to address one part of that real quick, right? I know it's kind of low-hanging fruit, but I think it's kind of needs to be said. You see some of the uproar, Cory, about the AP vote, right? And people who are like, oh, did this person watch this game, or so on and so forth, right? Cory, the people who are on the committee, and I do agree, I believe it was Steve Sarkisian who made this point, they have jobs, right? They have jobs. Cory, we have jobs. The people who vote for the AP poll, whether they are national reporters or beat reporters, especially a beat reporter, and I can speak from that perspective, You know where I spend 10 hours of my day on Saturday? At the stadium.
At DKR.
I promise you, I am not catching anything more than a glimpse. And I'm not an AP voter, to be clear. I'm just kind of laying it out, right? Kirk Bowles and Bob Ballou are the AP voters in Austin. I'm just laying it out. I catch nothing more than a glimpse or two of the game, right? So when you talk about this committee, it does seem as if, I'm not saying they're just looking at a box score and saying, hey, so on and so forth, but do you really expect me to believe that they are going through and watching every single game from the 12, 13, 14, 15 teams that are in the field? That alone would take up more or less a week, right?
Yeah.
I'm sorry. You're not expecting me to believe that Hunter Yurachek, who had to hire a coach, by the way.
Exactly. He did a mess of a coaching hire.
Had to do this little thing called hire a coach. You're not expecting me to believe that he has time to sit down and watch all these games. I do not believe that for 1 second. Now, one other point that I will make in kind of talking about the field you laid out, and I should say Joel Clapp laid out and you relayed, and I think is excellent. The group of 5 is the elephant in the room, and I'm someone who covered group of 5s for 5.5 years.
Talk to him.
I do not believe that the group of 5 automatically deserves a spot. Now, I want to make this point clear.
Can I ask why?
Sure. I'm going to tell you why right now. It is not because a group of 5 is automatically inferior. I graduated from a school, UCF. I believe 2017 UCF, for those who may remember, that's a team that went undefeated, didn't get a chance to play in a playoff because there was no playoff, or didn't chance to play in the playoff, right? Had Mackenzie Milton and Shaquem Griffin and all these guys, right? I think they could have given the team a run. My point is this. If you go through, Cory, and you look at the average margin of victory in the college ball playoff, in the history of the college ball playoff, it's been more or less between 17 and 20 points. In
blowouts.
In over 60% of the games have been decided by between 17 and 21 points. So it's not as if like, oh my gosh, we're putting a group of 5 team in there. All of a sudden it's, sanctimonious. However, the reason why I believe that a group of 5 team isn't entitled is this. It should be the best 12 teams in college football. Plain and simple. Not we're going to reserve one spot for a group of 5 for an underdog. No. If there is a group of 5, and Cory, there's methodology we can use to say, hey, this team, how did they fare in their conference, right? Did they look far and away better than the rest of the teams in their conference? Obviously, you cannot compare a Conference USA schedule and American Athletic Conference schedule to an SEC, right? Mm-hmm. a Mountain West schedule in SEC. But did they look far and away better than the rest of their conference teams, right? Did they come in undefeated? If they have one loss, what was the reason for that loss? Do they have a player that we think, is capable of an Ashton Genty, for example? Of course, we saw what happened last year, but my point remains, right? You don't have to just automatically give them a spot, because I apologize to this year's, what we think is going to be this year's representative in Tulane. I don't think Tulane, especially, and I know John Summerall is kind of doing double duty right now, but I don't think Tulane is going to be able to really compete, right? I just don't. So
hey, shout out Mean Green though, bro. I got North Texas in that one.
Okay, and North Texas, no disrespect, they just lost their head coach too, right?
Yeah,
I don't think North Texas is going to be able to compete. So
That's a great point. That's a great point.
My point is the group of five. There should be yearly consideration for a group of five, not a designated spot for a group of five. It should be the top 12 teams in college football, plain and simple.
And they're trying to make it like college basketball. Whole Cinderella story. Oh my gosh, such a great story. But this is football. You got to actually hit people, and you got to tackle people. You got to bring them to the ground, and I think that's completely different than basketball, where there's not as much contact. And when you have a guy that may be a great player like Ashton Genty, the thing with G5 schools, if someone like Ashton Genty goes down, the guy behind him ain't Ashton Genty. You know what I'm saying? Like, when it comes to these Power 4 schools, they kind of got another dude back there. And so the depth isn't there for these G5 schools. And so once you're going through a playoff format, yeah, you can maybe win the first round. And let's say you upset a team like A&M, no offense, I'm just throwing them out there. Well, then you got to play Georgia. Like, it doesn't get easier. It's going to get a lot tougher. And if you losing bodies by the second round, you're cooked. And so I think that's the other thing with G5 when it comes to football specifically. It's tough to sustain because you don't have the depth like these other Power 4 schools do. So you're totally right. Should they have an automatic bid? I don't think so. But should they have definitely a consideration? Yes. I don't agree with the whole they need to have their own separate tournament. I think that's crazy. Yeah, I don't agree with that at all. But if there's a school that's worthy, like I remember Cincinnati a couple years ago, like with Sauce Gardner and them. Desmond Ridder was on the quarterback. Like that was a decent team. Now, mind you, they got blown out. But the fact that they were in the playoff, I think they deserved that spot. And so those are the type of schools or those are the type of teams in G5 that, yeah, we can consider to make the top 12 for sure. But do they deserve an automatic bid? Yeah, I don't think so. And so, yeah, it's a sticky conversation because now you could have two G5 schools in there if Duke wins the AC tournament. And so I want to move there and just talk about these conference championship games. You have North Texas versus Tulane and American, ACC, Duke versus Virginia, Big Ten, Indiana versus Ohio State, Big 12, BYU versus Texas Tech, SEC, Georgia versus Alabama, and then the Sun Belt has Troy versus James Madison. Just throwing it out there. Who do you think is going to win those conference championship games? Just face value.
All right, so we'll start with the Big 12. I believe Texas Tech is going to win. I mean, I saw the way they handled BYU. Now, granted, that was at Jones AT&T Stadium in Lubbock, but I still believe you're going to go to Arlington, right? I mean, that's virtually going to be a home crowd for Texas Tech. Run through. You asked me ACC. I am leaning Virginia. I can't. I mean, if Duke wins that, then we got a whole different conversation. Cory.
Okay. Well, can we have that conversation? I did want to get you the ACC.
Let's do it.
If Duke wins, do they get in?
I can't see a way that Duke gets in.
Okay.
I can't.
So who gets in? The G5s?
I mean, you're probably looking at the G5s.
Tulane or North Texas and James Madison?
Or North Texas. I mean, James Madison, Troy, that's JMU. They just lost Bob Chesney to UCLA. James Madison's a good program. I mean, again.
They're ranked now, though.
They are ranked, yeah.
Yeah.
But again, though, if you're a Texas and that nuclear scenario happens, you not bang the drum and say, what are we doing here, right?
I mean, you make a good point, though. You make a good point there. Like, hey, come on, bro. Like, we really gonna let them in?
Do you want to force Steve Sarkisian to call an emergency press conference on Sunday? Because I think he will.
That's why I was confused, though, because in the show, that's what they were talking about. They're like, yeah, it could be Tulane and then maybe James Madison in that 12th spot. I'm like, where did that come into play? Just because they're 11-1? Like or at that point, they'll be 12-1?
Right.
Let's be real. Like, that could be the only way Texas does get in, right? If, let's say, Bama gets blown out and then Duke wins, now you have a conversation with Texas because then Miami would then sneak into that 11th spot and then possibly.
Texas. Go ahead, Cory. I'm sorry.
No, yeah, you're right. Finish it off. Texas could slowly get to that 12.
Texas would have to slide to 10, in my mind.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
And then you asked, about the Big Ten. I'm really interested in that one because, yes, Ohio State's been a juggernaut all year. Man, Indiana just keeps coming and coming. They do not back down. Like I'm interested in that one too. But yeah, like to kind of put a nice bow on it, the nuclear scenarios that we are talking about here and kind of hypothesizing, they would all be answered if we just had the top 12 teams in the tournament.
Yeah, it wouldn't be a conversation. It wouldn't even be a conversation. So yeah, you're totally right. I didn't even think about that. Like, yeah, if Duke wins and then let's say Bama gets blown out, now it's like, oh, it's a legit conversation for Texas to get in. I didn't even fathom that until just now. And so Georgia, Alabama, who do you have though?
That is such a tough one, because I think Kalen DeBoer is a really good coach. I think if you know the history in Georgia and Alabama, that's just one that, Kirby Smart, right? Sometimes a team just has your number, right? We saw what happened, of course, losing to Alabama earlier this year. But I do think Georgia's the better team. I think Georgia will win. Now, do I think it's going to be, if we just have that loss, do I think, is it going to be 17, 21 points? I don't see that. I think this is going to be a game that, quite frankly, is going to be a nail biter, a one-score game, in my opinion.
And then did you say who you have for? I agree with you. I think Georgia's going to win that. Big Ten? Did you say Big Ten?
Yeah, it's a Big Ten. I think Ohio State's going to win that game.
Can't you just see the world where Indiana does win that?
Of course.
And then everyone's talking about, well, maybe Ohio State's not as good as they think they are. And then they just blow out everybody in the playoff. I can totally see that happening. Just because if I'm Ohio State, why do I care? Why do I care about this game? To be honest, like this could easily be Indiana's Super Bowl. And then they may beat Ohio State. They may get the number 1 seed. But then guess what? I think Ohio State drops to 2?
Right. I think, Cory, if you want one reason why I guess, quote unquote, you would care, and I'm just going 10,000-foot view here.
Mm-hmm.
If Ohio State can go undefeated, right? You haven't had an undefeated national champion since 2019 LSU with Joe Burrow. And you go back to back. I mean, if you're Ryan Day and company, like if you're Jeremiah Smith, if you're, Carnell Tate, Caleb Downs, et cetera, like that's a legendary status right there.
Yeah, that's nice. That's a good point. I just want to get your thoughts just on the field, and then we can move over to these the coaches getting hired. But just when it face value, because I was just having this conversation with my homies in the group chat, because after the rankings came out, everyone started blowing me up. I like Texas Tech. I mean, I know a lot of Texas fans don't want to hear that, but face value, eye test. When I watched 3 or 4 Texas Tech games this year. Jacob Rodriguez jumps off the page to me. I think he should be getting Heisman conversations, but no one's really talking about him. Everyone's talking about Diego Pavia, which maybe he should be in New York too. But I really do think Jacob Rodriguez should be in consideration. Their offense looks legit. Leftwich from Texas State is now the OC over there. He brought that offense over there. A lot of Austin guys on that roster as well. I like Tech a lot. I think they're legit. Oregon, I still have questions with. And then, of course, Ole Miss. And we can address Ole Miss too while we're here, but just when it comes to those 4, 5, and 6, what do you think of Tech, Oregon, and Ole Miss?
I think Oregon's a team. Listen, that Big Ten is just so inflated, right? And you took
top heavy.
It's top heavy. That is Oregon flawed, yeah, but at the same point in time, it's almost hard to get a read because that's such a top heavy league with the teams that are at the top of the league, right? It's hard to get a real read there. I agree with you. I was a little skeptical of Texas Tech. I think the Big 12 is just a league full of cast-offs. And again, I say that as a UCF grad, my alma mater is in that league. But I kind of, I've seen Texas Tech, I want to say 3 times this year in full. And they do look head and shoulders above everybody else. Like Joey McGuire and company, you can talk about whether, oh my gosh, they bought a roster, so on and so forth. Like, this is college football, 2025.
Yeah, what are we talking about?
Everybody's putting money in their roster, right? As much money as they can find. The roster they have, I do believe, is a legitimate roster. And I do think it could stand up, not saying beat, but stand up with virtually every team in the nation except Ohio State, in my opinion, there. And then was the team you asked me about?
Ole Miss, last one.
Ole Miss, yeah, no, that's the interesting.
Yeah, we can talk about Ole Miss, yeah.
Okay, I'm not even going to get, because I'll save, we're going to talk about coaches in a second. I'll save the Lane Kiffin aspect. Um, and it's kind of hard to separate the two, only because Lane Kiffin, whatever you want to say about him as Lane Kiffin, his ability as, a offensive mind, right? And then you saw that Charlie Weiss Jr., their offensive coordinator, is going to coach Ole Miss through the playoff run. I think that's huge.
That's such a weird. That has to be weird though, right, bro? Like you're flying back to Oxford after you just hopped on a plane to Baton. Like
not after you just hopped on a flight to Baton Rouge. After you heard those people at the airport, they had F-bombs for Charlie too. So now he got to hop on the plane and come back. You want to invest in some security. But that aside, no. With Ole Miss, I think that's a really high-powered team. I think that's a team that on their best day can compete with anybody. I like Pete Golding as a defensive mind. I don't necessarily know how that's going to work as the head coach, but to be honest with you, I think if Ole Miss is going to make any real noise, they're going to have to outscore people. And that's why I bring it back to where I say it's hard to kind of separate the Lane Kiffin of it aspect of it, because you are losing, maybe not on game days per se. Of course, you'll have input. You would have input with Charlie Weiss as the play caller, but you're still losing a good part of your game day preparation, your game week, preparation with Lane Kiffin. So, and that shouldn't be held against the players, to be clear. Like they had no saying in that shouldn't be held against them. But I think it's interesting when you kind of evaluate their chances in this field.
Yeah, and I just want to cut to bed on any argument about, well, what about Florida State a couple years ago? I hate that people keep bringing that up when it comes to these rankings, because they're trying to compare Ole Miss losing Lane Kiffin to Florida State losing Jordan Travis. And it's a completely different situation, because with Florida State, we got to see with our own two eyes before the playoffs started what Florida State's offense looked like without Jordan Travis. And it was abysmal. I believe they had 55 passing yards total for the whole game. And so, yes, the committee took them out because they got to see what they look like. This time around, they don't get to see what they look like without Lane Kiffin. And so you have to keep them where they're at, and you can't punish the kids because your coach ditches you and goes across the country, or I should say just 2 states down, to coach at a school in the same conference. And so I just hate that people keep bringing that up. So if you are listening to this and you're one of those people, please stop. Anyways, I like Ole Miss for sure, but I just don't know what they look like. And at the end of the day, we won't know what they look like until the round 1. And what I do know about them, like you said, they're very high-powered. When they get ahead, they have a really good pass rush. Now, when they get behind, I don't know if they can get big-time stops when they need to. I think that's the problem with Ole Miss to me. Oregon, high-powered offense, they can't run the football. And when it comes to these types of games late in the year, you have to be able to run the football. And right now, they haven't proven that at all. And that's why I bring in Texas Tech. And Texas Tech can run the football. Cam Dickey, Jacoby Williams, they're able to run the football and go through the air. And they face adversity. And that's the thing with Texas Tech to me. You lose Baron Morton for a couple games. Will Hammond comes in, shout out Hutto, and he gets the job done. Yes, he has that one loss, but he weathered the storm for Baron to come back. I think that's what impressed me the most about Tech, is that they had big-time injuries in key positions and still was able to win football games. And so that's why I like them so much. And, now I'm looking at this ranking. This committee just doesn't make any sense to me. And I'm sorry to bring this back again to Miami and Notre Dame. But Oklahoma's ranked ahead of Bama. I wonder why, Eric. I wonder why. Because Oklahoma beat Bama.
Beat Alabama. Simple as that.
Texas over Vanderbilt. I wonder why. But why is Miami ranked? I can't get over this. I gotta leave it alone. So BYU, no shot? No shot to get in? If they lose to Tech, let's say they lose to Tech, still no shot? Why not? Because they would have 2 losses to the same team that's number 4 in the country.
They'd have 2 losses, and yes, the 2 losses would be against Texas Tech. But at that same point in time, I think if you take a look at the conference, is the Big 12 a 2-bid league? I think the answer is no. I apologize to people who may be Big 12 fans, but as I said, I think that's a league of kind of just a hodgepodge of teams, especially you take a look at some of the quote-unquote players, Colorado down, Arizona State down, right? So, for example, no, I do not see the Big 12 as a 2-bid league. And again, that's where, if we're going to bring this conversation full circle, and it's not saying that it's written in the bylaws that, X league's going to have X amount of bids, right? But you pretty much can kind of say, all right, yearly, if your conference is strong enough, right, you're going to get at least 2, except for the Big 12. I think if you get open up to just the top 12 teams in nation, then BYU is a stronger shot. But no, I don't see that.
All right. Before we get to the coaches, Ohio State's the best team in the country, right? By far.
Very much so. The best the most complete team, and I think they've looked the best from start to finish.
I mean, that defense, best since probably what, Jalen Carter, Georgia.
One of those Georgia defenses has to be.
Yeah, I don't see that team losing in the playoff, bro. I really don't. I don't see any weaknesses with them, especially now because they got freaking Bo Jackson back there running the football. He's a freak,
Yes.
true freshman. So now you got the running game going along with these receivers saying Heisman candidate. And that defense, Caleb Downs to me is the best player in college football. I wish that was what the Heisman was for and not just quarterback. But I do like Caleb Downs a lot. I think he's cerebral. So Matt Patricia, I just don't see them losing at all. And if they do, it'll be a shocker. I really think. And again, I can see them losing the Big Ten title game. I really can, because their goal is the championship. So I just wouldn't be, if I'm a Ohio State fan, I wouldn't be frazzled if they win that. I mean, if they lose that championship game, I would just keep the tires going and keep it pushing. And so, with that being said, though, coaches got hired. You talked a little bit about Lane Kiffin. Just initial thoughts on Kiffin leaving in the middle of a playoff run. What are your thoughts?
Not surprised listen, Lane Kiffin is Lane Kiffin, and I'm not going to be the guy who comes down and say, "Oh my gosh, he's this, that, and the other." Right? Like, do I think Lane Kiffin could have handled this better? Yes, right. And that I do think is unique to Lane Kiffin. He's the one who chose to fly his family out to Baton Rouge. He's the one who chose to fly his family out to Gainesville, right? That wasn't exactly hidden. He's the one who, kind of made this thing a spectacle. With that being said, people leave for better paying jobs, for better jobs all the time. I'm not faulting him for that, right? In terms of the hire itself, it's a unique fit, right? I think we kind of overstate fit in this sense, Cory. Mm-hmm. We make it seem like, oh my gosh, you're going to coach at LSU, you got to be an Ed Ogeron or someone who kind of, is of that, that Louisiana culture. No, Nick Saban is not from Louisiana. Okay. And Nick Saban is a guy who changed the LSU program 25 years ago. So there's that. The reason I think it's an interesting fit is I just don't think it's long-term. I don't think is Lane's contract 7 years, I believe.
Yeah. I can double check that.
I don't think he makes it all 7 years. I think the job Lane Kiffin wants is Alabama. That's quite frankly the job I think he wants.
Really? What makes you say that? I'm interested.
Because he openly stated that Nick Saban told him to take the LSU job. I think Nick Saban, has, whether it's Steve Sarkisian or Lane Kiffin, right? These coaches who he's kind of given second chances and helped out. I think he holds a level of respect with these guys. Now, it's a whole different conversation that an ESPN employee, right, is telling someone, hey, go take a job, right? Like, I think that's pretty interesting. And then having, talking about it on air in a certain fashion. But nevertheless, I don't think he's long for that job for that reason. Also, I think Lane Kiffin will just wear on the people in Louisiana. I think there's that. I don't want to veer to another coaching opening, so I'll let you kind of take in what direction you want. But there's another hire, big time hire, that I think is interesting. I think it has the potential to be better than LSU, but I also think the fit is awkward.
Yeah, just to confirm, it's a 7-year, $91 million contract for Lane, about $13 million per year. But he also has a little stipend in there if they win a national championship, with him still being the head coach. I like the hire for LSU, to be honest. I said a couple weeks back on Mose Knows, I thought Lane at LSU would be electric. I think him having those resources, now he doesn't have to recruit people to Oxford. He can just recruit kids to stay home, which is a big plus, and it's way easier to recruit that way. And not only are you staying home, you're getting Louisiana kids, and we already know they different out there. Texas, I will always say Texas has better linemen, big, beefy guys. You know what I'm saying? If you want big humans, Texas is the place to go. But if you want speed, I think you go to 3 places: Cali, Florida, and Louisiana. And I think with that, Lane Kiffin's in a great spot. You saw Lamar Brown there with them when he came and introduced, and the big-time recruit for LSU. So he's tapped in. And I just think with the resources, and I think Lane's personality fits Louisiana players. I don't know about the community, but I think the players will gravitate toward him. I think any player would gravitate towards Lane just because he wears everything on his sleeve, right? And I think players would rather have that than someone that's kind of like closed off to himself. And you hear that a lot about Sark. When I talk to players, they say, we like Sark a lot because he's real with us. He tells us about his past. He tells us about his failures and his faults. And I think with Lane, he does the same. Now, how he goes about things when it comes to big time decisions, yeah, it's definitely questionable. But I don't know how much college players or college athletes care about that. That's just something, I think that's a personal thing. But I think it's a great hire. I see it now when you say, like, I don't think he lasts all 7 years. I can agree because when has he lasted anywhere? 7 years?
Right.
So that would be interesting if that Bama job does come available because we all know, like, DeBoer is just 2 losses away from people just running him out of town for some reason, even though he keeps winning. And so if that job does come available, that would be crazy, though, bro. You go from Ole Miss to LSU to Bama. I guess Saban did LSU to Bama, so not too crazy. But, yeah, that would be wild. And so, yeah, I did want to touch on a couple more hires. I want to go to G5, but I know we could talk about my favorite hire of the coaching cycle was James Franklin. I think, of course, like, he's a perfect fit for Virginia Tech. Did you have any thoughts about that?
I do think quite frankly, I think, Virginia Tech, you'll get a coach of James Franklin's stature. That's them out kicking their coverage, right? And good for them be able to get that squared away, weeks ago, right? And you already see that hire is paying dividends because Virginia Tech's a job that I think it's not that it's a bad job because it's not, but Frank Beamer made that job. Okay, let's not sugarcoat it, right? It's a job. It's one of those jobs that the coach made. I would put Penn State, and you see Penn State's having issues hiring a coach. There's some speculation that Jimmy Sexton is playing a role in that, but Penn State is a job that the coach made the job, and Joe Paterno, right? Because if you take a look, Penn State, that the Big Ten has always been a Michigan-Ohio State league with occasionally like Michigan State or with teams. Penn State's only won the Big Ten over the past 25, 30 years, like 3 times, right? So the coach has made the job. I think it's the same thing with Virginia Tech, right? So there's that. There's one other hire that I do want to touch on. I don't want to steal your thunder, Cory, but I was making that point.
Come on.
Making that point about a fit. Florida hiring John Summerall. Let me tell you right now, okay? As a native Floridian, there are certain schools that want to win a certain way. It's not that they don't want to win, but they want to win a certain way. I think LSU is one of those teams, right, that you're going to have a running back. You're going to have studs on defense, right? And not saying that Lane Kiffin will be able to put together a high-powered offense, but certain positions you just know, like Leonard Fournette. You can go back, kind of list goes on, the way they play football. Florida wants to score points. Want to put points on the board. There's a reason Steve Spurrier is still highly regarded in Florida. Of course, played there, won a Heisman there, coached there, et cetera, et cetera. The Gators, Cory, I'm a Floridian, B, I'm a little bit older than you. I don't remember like Steve Spurrier, from like the mid to early to mid 90s, but late 90s through 2000s, like score points, fun and gun. We're throwing the ball. We're putting receivers in the NFL, running backs in the NFL. Then you transition Urban Meyer, scoring Percy Harvin, Tim Tebow.
Facts.
He shall not be named a tight end, but like you're scoring points. All right. I'm sorry. I just know the way to say it.
I respect. I respect that. We don't need to talk about it.
Scoring points, right? So for John Summerall, is a really good coach. I had a chance to cover his first bowl game when he was at Troy. I was still covering Group of Fives. Really good coach, really good dude. But he's a defensive guy. Florida did that with Will Muschamp. Didn't quite work. So I'll be curious to see how the offense is going to look at Florida. Because just on paper, I think it's a good coach. He's going to win games. But Florida fans do not want to win 20-10. They do not want to win 23-16. They want 35 plus.
And that's why I wanted you on the pod, because you have that experience with these G5 coaches that are now getting Power 4, and not only Power 4, but SEC jobs. And so I wanted to talk to you about some of that history. And, you mentioned it about Florida and their history, wanting to score points. And I just got a feeling, and I just got a taste of it when Florida played Texas. I mean, the Swamp is the best atmosphere I've ever been to. I keep telling people that. They think I'm crazy. But DKR, now mind you, I don't have a huge palette of stadiums I've been to. But, it's somewhat decent. Like the shoe is cool. DKR, Kyle Field is probably the loudest I've been to, but the Swamp was the best environment, and I can't imagine a team that is consistently good with the Swamp behind them. And I just saw the potential of what that program could be. Mind you, when Texas played Florida, it was raining at 2:00, and it was still loud and packed. And so I can't imagine what it looks like when the program's rolling. And so I understand what you're saying. Like, if you want to have that type of atmosphere be effective, you can't have a 20-10 game. You got to have something that's high scoring. And so that's interesting that you mentioned John Summerall. And so that's why I wanted to also bounce over to another G5 coach,
Yeah.
and Alex Golish,
Yes.
South Florida. What's your thoughts on him?
Alex Golish is a really good offensive mind, right? He's a guy, for those who don't know, of course, got the job at Auburn. I'm going to be interested to see how he can recruit that area, right? Because for me, I don't know how you feel, Cory, excuse me, but I think Auburn is a really good job. But I've never thought of Auburn in the way you think of Alabama, LSU, Georgia, Florida. And that's not saying that they're a notch below. Obviously, Auburn won a national championship with Cam Newton, and they have, historically, put together really good teams. I just wonder, in terms of recruiting, right? Where is Auburn right now? But that aside, Alex Golish was at Tennessee prior, but of course spent time at UCF, of course head coach at USF. I think what I like about him, Cory, and this is kind of the Lane Kiffin factor. If you're going to be an offensive-minded coach, right, you need to be someone who can motivate, who can reach your entire team. You can't be that guy, whether offensive-minded or defensive-minded. You can't be so singularly focused that you just turn the other side of the ball over to one person. In college, right? I think in the NFL, you can kind of get away with that a little bit. But in college, because you're still dealing with, 17 to 23-year-olds, right? You need to be able to reach everybody. Steve Sarkisian can do that. You talk about Lane Kiffin. People do want to play for Lane Kiffin. I think Alex Golish did that really well at USF, building a culture. For those who don't know, USF's program was down big time prior to Alex Golish being there. Forgetting that Jeff Scott, there we go, former Clemson offensive coordinator Jeff Scott was the head coach prior. I want to say he won 5 games over the last 3 years he was there.
Okay? And correct me if I'm wrong, during that time period, it felt like kind of outside of the big Power 4 Florida schools, Lane Kiffin and FAU was kind of the hot thing in Florida if you weren't going to a Power 4. Is that correct?
UCF, because UCF had their run from
You're
17
right.
to 21. But Lane Kiffin, yes, was there. I mean, when Lane was there, he won 2 conference titles in 3 years. So the FAU was hot, but UCF probably a notch above them. Gotcha. But to your point, no, USF kind of just missed their opportunity as far as getting in a power conference, right? Coming off the Willie Taggart era when he had them winning 10 games a year, right? Then they went to Charlie Strong, things dipped off. Then Jeff Scott, now Alex Golish. But the point I was making with him is he built a culture. He reaches players. So I think from that aspect alone, and you're getting someone who's in their early 40s. So, you're not getting someone who's kind of, later in their career. I think you have someone you can build with. And seemingly this is a job for Alex Golish that, he's kind of invested in being in 5, 6, 7 years, not, hey, this is the kind of the jumping off point to something else. I think it's a home run hire, in my opinion. I initially thought Arkansas was going to get Alex Golish. And quite frankly, Auburn's a better job than Arkansas. So he went out there.
And I think if you saw the Iron Bowl, you could see, like, they got dudes. Unfortunately, the dude that they trust the most, Cam Coleman, fumbled that football. But like Cam's a prime example. Like, you can get 5-star dudes to come to Auburn. And I think right now with Golish, he just needs a QB. Like, I really do think that roster is good enough to maybe shake something in the SEC next year. Because we saw it firsthand against Alabama. Coming back from down 17, that's not easy to do against the Tide. And so being able to not only have that type of comeback performance, but like be honestly in the driver's seat late in that game, but you fumble it away. I think at the end of the day, you just kind of need a quarterback. And maybe they have it in that true freshman, which I don't understand why he didn't get any burn against Bama after he had that 6-touchdown performance the week before, or 5 touchdowns, however many he had. But I think that's the next step. Just get your guy at quarterback, and I feel like they can compete for sure. And you're right with Arkansas. I think that Auburn's a better job than Arkansas, and that's why Arkansas went out and got Ryan Silverfield from Memphis. And do you have any knowledge about him?
No, Ryan Silverfield, again, really good coach. The reason I like that hire for Arkansas is it's it's territory, right? Like from Memphis to Little Rock, I mean from Memphis to Fayetteville, excuse me, not that far, right? It's in that region. But Ryan Silverfield, really good coach. I know you kind of look and say, oh, he didn't quite get it to where Mike Norvell had it prior at Memphis. But with that being said, I think part of that was kind of, the conference and kind of the way that kind of evolved. But Ryan Silverfield is a good coach. I think given what was out there, right? I mean, there wasn't a home run, quote unquote, hire that they were going to get in my mind. I think Ryan Silverfield was a good hire.
And, as we wrap up the pod, thank y'all for listening in. If you're listening in right now, man, go ahead, like, comment, subscribe. Heck, man, share this mug, bro. This is great content. My boy Eric Henry, 24/7 Sports, doing his thing right now. Penn State. I'm looking around. Where do you go? I have no idea who you hire at this point. Who's available? You're not going to poach anybody because it seems like everyone's already extended. Joey McGuire just extended today. At this point, who do you get? Do you have any idea?
I'm going to give you a name that is not going to be a sexy name, but given the fact that they've struck out so many times, I think it's a name they may have to consider because it'll buy them time to get to, quote unquote, the next hire. Casey Keeler, former head coach at Sam Houston, now at Temple.
Yeah.
Casey Keeler is a Northeast guy, right? He was at Delaware prior to Sam Houston. He's from Pennsylvania. That's why he went back and got the job at Temple. Temple had been down bad with Stan Drayton as head coach. Casey Keeler flipped that thing around in 1 year, okay? That's a good coach. Cory, I'm a believer. Sometimes you got to hire coaches who win. Curt Cignetti, right? We all know where he was at James Madison. Not a sexy hire, right? I think the same thing with Bob Chesney going to UCLA, right? But in the case of Cignetti and Casey Keeler, older guys, they kind of get weeded out because like, oh, they've been at such and such level for so many years. You don't see the 35-year-old fast riser, right? Who took a G5 job and then went so on and so forth, right? No, when you've been coaching into your late 50s and 60s and all you've done is win, you know how to build a program. That, Cory, is transferable in my mind. So if you're not going to try and you keep talking about this, oh, they'll go poach Kalen DeBoer. Okay, you think Alabama ain't got money?
Facts. So why would you leave for Penn State? Like,
Penn State. I genuinely believe if you're not going to give an assistant that job, which does seem kind of hard to sell, right? You fire James Franklin, you go and hire some hotshot assistant. Go get a Casey Keeler and say, listen, if my memory serves me right, Casey's in his early 60s, right? So maybe, that's a 4 or 5 year deal, right? He stabilizes the program, or I shouldn't say stabilize because the program, was a playoff team last year, right? He knows how to build a program. He knows the area. He's able to keep it at the level it's at. And then maybe you revisit that in a few years. But yeah, right now you look like you whiffed real bad on firing James Franklin, not having something really solidified.
No plan. That's my thing. You can't jump the gun. And this is a funny thing to me. You jumped the gun and fired James to be the first guy or the first program out in the coaching search field. And now you're the last team to hire a coach. What was the point of firing him so early? Like, it just made no sense to me. You would think you already had somebody lined up. Now, I don't know. What about, let's throw some names out there. Like a Bill O'Brien, right? I know he's at Boston College right now, but he has history there. And he has a winning pedigree. Everyone keeps talking about these NFL guys. Do you think any NFL guy would jump down like a Brian Daboll? Or I heard today, Pittsburgh, the fired Tomlin chance. Does Tomlin ever think about jumping down to college and going to Penn State if he gets fired?
Mike Tomlin doesn't strike me as a college coach. He strikes
me either.
Coach. Bill O'Brien, that'd be a hard sell because you did that already, right? Like that.
Yeah.
That'd be a really hard. So I'm trying to think of a NFL coach or NFL.
Not Daboll.
I think Daboll's interesting. I mean, Brian Daboll was at Alabama, if my memory serves me correct, right? So he knows the college game. That's intriguing. But again, how do you sell to your fan base? You fired a guy who won a lot of games to bring in Brian Daboll. You know what I mean? Like we all know why
They're
James Franklin
cooked. They're cooked either. Like at this point, you waited too long. All the guys are gone.
Yeah. I just was gonna say we all know why James Franklin got fired because he asked for the world and he lost Northwestern. Right? You can't. In today's Steve Sarkisian almost faced that for asking for. I shouldn't say asking for the world in maybe Texas case, but the amount of money that's invested in this roster, you can't lose to Kentucky, Mississippi State, right? Luckily for Texas fans and for Steve Sarkisian, they won both those games. If you'd come back 4-4, you'd be having a whole real discussion about, hey, why are we funding this roster to the level we are when we're 4-4? That's what got James Franklin fired. But you got to have something better than this.
I don't think they do, Eric. I don't think they do. I think there's nothing better on the podcast streams though than you on the mic. Appreciate you for hopping on.
I appreciate you, fam.
Appreciate you for hopping on, bro. I always enjoy your insight and just your friendship in general. If you're listening to this podcast, you already know what to do. Like, comment, subscribe, Spotify, Apple Music, YouTube, wherever you're watching or listening to or from. Thank you so much. Hope you enjoyed the content. I think it was great stuff. My boy E. Henry doing his thing. As always, Eric, I got to make sure to plug your stuff in. Where can people see your work?
Yeah, listen, man. I'm the third hardest working man in Austin sports.
Third.
You got Cory Mose. There are two people who I'm pretty sure have clones. Cory Mose and Mike Harge. Okay, as Mike Harge making an appearance everywhere. Mike Harge, Monday night, Tuesday night, Wednesday night. Mike Harge out. You see the flyers everywhere. Mike Harge.
But hey, sponsored by Kolache Factory.
clearly, very clear. But I appreciate it, man. You can find me on Twitter or X, as you may know it now, as at Eric C. Henry _. You can find me, my work covering Texas football, basketball, baseball, on socials at Horns247 and online at Horns247.com. And of course, you can find me pretty regularly on AM 1300 The Zone, whether it's Thursday with Mike Harge or Mark Henry, or if it's pregame shows or just pinch hitting, hosting, whatever it may be. AM 1300 The Zone as well.
That's what I'm saying, bro. You talking about third hardest working, bro. You up there, bro. You competing for that top spot. You all over the place, bro. Respect to what you do and all the work that you put in. And so thank y'all for listening into another episode of Mose Knows. Texas, number 13 in the college football playoff rankings. Oh, my goodness. We'll see what happens. I know a lot of Texas fans will be Duke fans this weekend, Texas Tech fans this weekend, and definitely heavy Georgia fans as well. Thank you for listening to Mose Knows. Talk to y'all later.